In the quiet town of Elmwood, where the streets were lined with quaint, tree-shaded homes and neighbors greeted each other with warmth, the courthouse stood as a stoic sentinel of justice, its brick facade exuding an air of authority and respect. Inside its solemn walls, Judge Charles Castellanos, a distinguished figure in his black robe, commanded attention and admiration as he presided over the morning's traffic court proceedings. With his reputation for fairness and an unblemished track record, he was known to the citizens of Elmwood not just as a judge, but as a man of principle who sought to ensure that justice was served with integrity. His crisp white shirt, perfectly ironed and tucked in, paired with a meticulously knotted tie, reflected his meticulous nature and his no-nonsense approach to the law, traits that endeared him to the community. As the courtroom buzzed with the low murmurs of anxious townsfolk waiting for their cases to be heard, the atmosphere was tinged with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Some fidgeted with their clothes, while others whispered quietly to their companions, sharing anecdotes about their quickly approaching moments in front of the judge. But amidst this backdrop of unease, there was an unspoken understanding. When the gavel fell, it would cut through the chatter and envelop the room in a heavy silence akin to a lake at dawn, where every ripple was stilled, leaving only the untouched surface of calm. Then, abruptly, the door at the back of the courtroom creaked open, breaking the hushed anticipation with a soft, yet noticeable sound. In stepped a young black woman, her presence an unsettling contrast to the authority of the courtroom. Her eyes wide and shining with a mixture of fear and determination, darted around the room as her tentative steps brought her to the defendant's stand. Clutching a crumpled ticket in her trembling hands, the wrinkled paper felt like a boiling testament to her anxiety, a physical reminder of the weight of her circumstances. When her name was finally called, the air thickened with expectation. She approached the stand, her heart racing in her chest as she stepped into the spotlight of judgment. The judge's gaze, steady and discerning, met hers, and she felt a flutter of apprehension wash over her. With a voice that quivered, barely above a whisper, she recounted her plight. She had been caught driving without a license, a minor infraction in the grand scheme of things, but for her, it loomed like an insurmountable mountain of a problem. As a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet, she had found herself trapped in a cycle of struggle, with every dollar earned stretched thin over bills and necessities. The required classes and tests to obtain her license seemed eternally out of reach, like a distant shore she could only gaze at from afar. The courtroom, filled with familiar faces, reflected her life, mirrored in the gazes of fellow townsfolk who understood the relentless demands of day-to-day survival. In that moment, she wasn't just another name on a docket. She was a story, a testament to the challenges faced by many in Elmwood, struggling against the tide of circumstance with grit and hope in her heart. The judge peered over the rims of his polished silver spectacles as he regarded the woman standing before him. His expression was as inscrutable as a sealed envelope, revealing nothing of the thoughts that churned behind his eyes. Every detail of the courtroom faded into a blur, and his pen hovered in the air above the notepad, poised to capture the next moment that would irrevocably alter her life. For him, this wasn't just another case. It was a moment steeped in the weight of his heritage. Raised in the lap of legal privilege, he had been surrounded by a lineage of distinguished lawyers, each bearing the proud mantle of justice and emphasizing the importance of diligence and adherence to the law. He took his duties seriously, seeing the law as a bulwark of fairness, a protective shield safeguarding the community from the reckless waters of chaos and disorder. As he leaned back slightly in his chair, his brow furrowed in concentration, the tension in the room became palpable. Finally, he broke the silence, announcing the fine with the gravity that the moment demanded. $150, ma'am, he stated firmly, his voice resonating through the hushed courtroom. The sound reverberated against the walls, filling the air with an austere significance. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief at the amount, the reality of it striking her like a sudden gust of wind. She instinctively raised her hand to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips before she could catch it. Disbelief morphed into resignation as her shoulders slumped in defeat. An unmistakable expression of despair etched across her features. This was a steep price for a mistake, a misstep in her life that had spiraled beyond her control, and one that her circumstances deemed her unable to pay. Yet, just as she began to sink into the depths of her dismay, she felt an unexpected shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the weight of the room had altered, a palpable stillness enveloping her as she raised her gaze from the floor. What she found caught her off guard. The judge's eyes had narrowed slightly, and he leaned in toward her, his demeanor transforming. This time, there was an element of curiosity shining through his previously stoic facade. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. His tone now softened, almost tentative, a marked contrast to the gravity that had dominated their exchange moments earlier. "But are you sure you don't have any special considerations I should be aware of?" In that instant, a glimmer of hope sparked within her, a chance that perhaps her plea for understanding might not fall on deaf ears. It was a moment pregnant with possibility, a lifeline cast amidst the stark reality of her financial predicament. The woman took a deep breath, the kind that fills the lungs with resolve and steadiness, and as she straightened her back, it was as if she was aligning not only her posture, but also her purpose. She spoke with a level of dignity that radiated through the room, catching everyone off guard, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. "Your Honor," she began, her voice unwavering and steady, laden with authority and confidence, "I am the newly appointed Chief of Police for the town of Elmwood." In that striking moment, the judge's pen froze midair, hovering in a suspended state of disbelief. His eyes darted to the badge that she had subtly revealed just beneath her jacket, glinting under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of her hard-earned position and responsibility. As her words sank in, the room erupted into a symphony of whispers, buzzing with shock and disbelief. The color visibly drained from the judge's face, the implications of his previous assumptions crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The weight of his error pressed heavily upon his conscience as the reality of the situation dawned on him. In the stunned silence that followed, the intricate power dynamics within the courtroom began to unravel like a cheap sweater snagged on an unseen nail. The judge found himself grappling with a tumultuous blend of embarrassment and realization. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile his preconceived notions about the woman standing before him with the profound truth of her identity and authority. He had allowed himself to make an assumption based purely on her race and her socioeconomic status, an unfortunate oversight that now echoed in the stillness of the courtroom. As the moment stretched out, the woman's calm and composed demeanor only served to underscore the stark contrast between her professional poise and the judge's own moment of vulnerability. It was a sudden reversal of fate. She was no longer just a figure subjected to the judgment of the courtroom, but a leader ready to address the very biases that had clouded the judge's judgment. In that charged atmosphere, it became evident that her presence represented a turning point, not only for the case at hand, but potentially for the broader fabric of their community. The judge's heart raced with the realization that he would have to confront not just the mistakes of the past, but also the larger, systemic issues at play, all while navigating this unexpected and pivotal encounter. The judge's cheeks burned with embarrassment as the courtroom buzzed with the murmurs of the crowd, the low hum of voices intertwining in a cacophony of disbelief and judgment. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a heavy weight of guilt settling in his chest like an anchor dragging him down into the depths of despair. He had always prided himself on his fairness, the cornerstone of his judicial philosophy, and yet here he stood, caught in a glaring act of prejudice that contradicted everything he believed in. As the whispers grew louder, he could sense the penetrating gaze of the town resting upon him, expectant and critical, as if they were waiting with bated breath for his next move. Each second ticked by in agonizing slow motion, amplifying the gravity of the situation. This wasn't merely about a fine. It was about the integrity of the justice system in Elmwood and whether it truly served all its citizens without bias. He was reminded that the scales of justice must remain balanced, yet he felt his side tipping dangerously under the weight of his misjudgment. In that moment, he was acutely aware of the burden of authority that rested on his shoulders and how easily it could lead to egregious missteps if not wielded with caution and integrity. The reflective surfaces of the courtroom mirrored his inner turmoil, trapping the embarrassment and regret that swirled through him. He cleared his throat with great effort, trying to regain his composure amidst the chaotic energy filling the air. I apologize, Chief." He stumbled over the words, his voice wavering slightly as he struggled against the tide of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Ignoring the sense of incredulity he felt from the crowd, he focused on the individual before him. "Clearly, there has been a misunderstanding. Please, take a seat." The woman nodded, her eyes never leaving his, a mixture of disappointment and determination visible in her gaze. As she took her place in the front row with a quiet dignity, the atmosphere in the room shifted, the air thick with unresolved tension. Every eye was fixed on the judge, each person feeling the weight of the moment. With a trembling hand, he called for a recess, his gavel banging down on the desk resonating like a thunderclap in the stillness. The echo of the gavel faded, but the truth of the situation lingered, wrapping around him like a shroud. He knew this was only the beginning of a much larger reckoning, one that would demand honesty, introspection, and a commitment to uphold the principles of justice he so deeply valued. During the break, the judge retreated to the solitude of his chambers, where he found himself enveloped in a tumultuous storm of thoughts and emotions. As he sat alone, the weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily upon him, and he began to reflect deeply on the multitude of past cases he had presided over. Vivid images flowed through his mind, bringing forth the faces of defendants whom he had encountered throughout his career. Each face told a story, and he wondered about the pain and hardship that for some of them might have stemmed from the unconscious biases he had unknowingly harbored. In this moment of introspection, the judge grappled with a profound question that shook the foundation of his convictions. Was he truly the champion of justice he had always envisioned himself to be, or had he merely become another cog in a vast machine that perpetuated systemic inequality? The realization struck him with undeniable force. He understood that the incident he had just witnessed was not merely an isolated event. It was, in fact, a sharp reflection of the deeper societal issues that had seeped insidiously into his courtroom, challenging the ideals of fairness and impartiality that he had sworn to uphold. The magnitude of this revelation stirred something within him. With a deep breath, he made a resolute decision. This moment would not simply fade into the background of his career as yet another routine episode. No, he wanted it to be a defining turning point in his professional journey. He would take proactive steps to educate himself, immersing himself in literature and scholarship that examined the intricate complexities of race, power dynamics, and social justice. He recognized the importance of seeking guidance and insight from those who had devoted their lives to understanding these issues. Moreover, he knew he could not stand idly by. He had responsibilities that extended beyond the courtroom bench. This would not be a fleeting moment of discomfort, but rather a catalyst for meaningful change that would ripple through his future decisions. Armed with renewed determination, he resolved to confront the biases that had clouded his judgment and to work diligently to ensure that the scales of justice remained balanced for all individuals who came before him. As he lifted himself from the weighty embrace of the chair, he stepped out of his chambers into the buzzing atmosphere of the courthouse. His heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, but he was resolute in his purpose. He was ready to face the woman again, not as an adversary caught in the crosshairs of a flawed system, but as a fellow servant of the law, committed to seeking shared understanding and genuine justice. In that moment, he embraced the possibility of transformation, both for himself and for the community he served. It was time to turn the tide, to foster a legal environment where every voice mattered and every person was treated with the dignity they deserved. The woman waited patiently, her gaze unwavering, her posture strong and resolute. It was a tense moment in the courtroom, an atmosphere thick with unspoken emotions and quiet tension. The walls echoed with a faint, hushed murmur as onlookers shifted in their seats, anticipation hanging heavy in the air like a storm cloud. As the judge approached the bench with measured steps, he paused for a brief moment, gathering his thoughts and emotions. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm but tinged with remorse, resonating throughout the room, capturing everyone's attention. "Chief," Judge Castellanos began, his tone sincere, "I should have recognized your position. This was a mistake, and I will rectify it immediately." His words were an earnest admission of error, underscored by a desire to restore balance to the proceedings. He proceeded to dismiss the fine that had been unjustly imposed upon her, a gesture of goodwill that sought to alleviate the burden placed upon her. Moreover, he extended a hand of assistance, offering to help her navigate the complexities of rectifying her license situation, a process that often felt daunting and overwhelming. The courtroom was caught in a mixture of reactions, watching in rapt silence as Judge Castellanos' demeanor underwent a remarkable transformation. What had begun as an authoritative presence shifted to one of humility and acknowledgement, revealing a deeper understanding of the complex dynamics at play. Some observers seemed in awe of his willingness to admit fault, while others crossed their arms skeptically, murmuring amongst themselves about the implications of favoritism and the integrity of the judicial process. The woman, however, remained stoic throughout this exchange. Her expression held the weight of both understanding and a bittersweet hint of disappointment, reflecting the complexity of the situation. She had anticipated a moment like this, but it did not erase the reality of the circumstances that had brought her to this point. "Thank you, Judge Castellanos," she replied, her voice measured and calm, carrying with it a quiet strength that demanded respect. "But I'm not here for special treatment. I'm here for the same justice everyone else expects to receive." Her words hung in the air, a gentle yet unwavering reminder of the work that still needed to be done, not just for herself, but for all those who sought fairness under the law. The courtroom resonated with her declaration, prompting a ripple of contemplation among those present. It was clear that while she appreciated the judge's acknowledgement of his error, what she truly sought was an unwavering commitment to justice for all, a cornerstone of the legal system that must never waver, regardless of status or circumstance. The judge nodded solemnly, a weight pressing heavy on his heart as he contemplated the gravity of the situation at hand. "You're right, Chief," he admitted, his voice steady yet laced with determination. "And I intend to ensure that's what everyone gets." The assurance rolled off his tongue, but deep down, he recognized that this was only the beginning of a long and arduous journey, a journey that would demand his utmost introspection and a courageous confrontation with his own deeply ingrained beliefs. He steeled himself for the challenge ahead, ready to delve into the uncomfortable truths that lay beneath the surface, to educate himself, and to advocate tirelessly for the justice that every person in his town rightly deserved. The subsequent weeks were transformative for the judge. He immersed himself wholeheartedly in a myriad of literature, devouring books that explored the roots of implicit bias and the systemic inequities that pervaded society. He attended workshops designed to provoke thought and discussion around prejudice and discrimination, eager to glean insights that would enrich his understanding. Seeking guidance, he reached out to a local diversity advocate, a remarkable woman of color whose unwavering commitment had driven her to dedicate her life to fostering understanding and cooperation between law enforcement and the communities they served. Under her mentorship, he began to grasp the complexities of societal dynamics and started to perceive the world through a lens that refrained from overlooking the privileges of his upbringing. With each piece of knowledge he absorbed, a sense of urgency stirred within him, igniting a fire that could not be extinguished. The incident that had catalyzed his journey of self-discovery was not merely an isolated event. It had reverberated throughout the community, sparking passionate debates across social media platforms and roaring discussions in town hall meetings. The townspeople were becoming increasingly aware of the nuances of bias, and the divide between them was palpable. Some individuals lauded the judge for his willingness to confront his own shortcomings and learn from his mistakes, viewing it as a courageous step towards progress. Others, however, remained skeptical, questioning whether he could serve impartially given his newfound awareness of his biases. This was a conversation that Elmwood had never truly engaged in before, but it was one that was undeniably long overdue. As the debates waged on, the judge realized that he had a pivotal role to play, not just as an authority figure, but as a catalyst for change. He began to envision a series of dialogues meant to engage the community, a platform where people could share their experiences and confront the realities of bias openly and honestly. This was not just about his growth. It was about nourishing a collective understanding, fostering empathy, and pulling back the shroud that for so long obscured the pivotal issues within their society. In the coming months, the judge would also initiate outreach programs aimed at involving all strata of the community in conversations about justice, equity, and inclusion. He understood that true progress would necessitate not only his personal evolution, but also a unified effort towards cultivating a more just environment for everyone in Elmwood. The road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, but he was resolute in his commitment to leading the way, firmly believing that the strength of a community lay in its ability to embrace dialogue, transformation, and ultimately healing. The judge was acutely aware of the limitations of mere rhetoric. He understood that in a profession built on the tenets of justice and fairness, actions resonate far louder than words. It became clear to him that to make a genuine impact, he needed to embody the principles of change he wished to see within the judicial system. Thus, he set forth the ambitious proposal of instituting a new training program designed specifically for all judicial officers within the town. This program would not only address the critical issue of implicit biases, but also strive to equip judges and court staff with the skills required to recognize, understand, and mitigate these hidden prejudices that often insidiously influence decision-making. As he presented his proposal to his fellow judges, he was met with a mixed reaction. Some of his colleagues greeted the idea with an open mind, recognizing the need for self-improvement and the potential benefits of a more enlightened approach to justice. They understood that acknowledging biases was a crucial step in ensuring fair treatment for all individuals, regardless of their backgrounds. However, there were others who met the initiative with skepticism or even outright resistance. These individuals were entrenched in their ways, holding tightly to traditions and practices that had remained unchanged for many years. For them, the very notion of implicit bias was either dismissed as a non-issue or seen as an unwelcome critique of their capabilities as judges. Despite the conflicting responses, Judge Castellanos remained resolute in his mission. He was acutely aware that the road ahead would not be easy. Change often provokes discomfort, and he recognized that pushing for progress within an established system would come with its own set of obstacles. Yet, his determination was unwavering. This was not merely about correcting a single misjudgment. It was about reigniting a spark of integrity within the judiciary and serving as a catalyst for broader societal transformation. Judge Castellanos envisioned himself not just as a presiding officer of the court, but as a beacon of change, illuminating the often dimly lit corners of the legal system he had dedicated his life to uphold. He realized that to inspire others, he would first need to embody the principles of accountability and humility, acknowledging his own missteps while demonstrating a genuine commitment to improvement and growth. His understanding of the journey ahead was profound. He knew that achieving true equality and justice would require sustained effort, resilience, and collaboration. This journey was not a short dash, but a marathon, a long-term commitment to fostering understanding and change within the community. Each step he took, whether it was engaging in meaningful dialogues with his colleagues, organizing training sessions, or advocating for a culture of continuous learning, was a significant contribution toward shaping a more equitable Elmwood. Driven by hope and conviction, Judge Castellanos dedicated himself entirely to this transformative mission, firmly believing that even the smallest strides could lead to monumental change over time. One tranquil evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a warm golden glow over the town square, Judge Castellanos strolled along the familiar cobblestones. The gentle breeze carried with it the distant sounds of laughter and chatter, creating a picturesque scene amid the twinkling lights of nearby shops and cafes. As he rounded a corner, he spotted the chief of police, an imposing figure known for her strong leadership. Yet in this moment, she was transformed into a mother embracing a rare moment of joy. She was kneeling beside her young son, who seemed to be giggling uncontrollably at something amusing, their laughter breaking the serene evening's stillness. Feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation, Judge Castellanos braced himself and approached them. His heart raced, thudding loudly in his chest, echoing the apprehension he felt about their last encounter. A conversation fraught with tension and unvoiced frustrations. "Chief," he called out, his voice wavering slightly, reflecting the weight of their previous discussion. She turned her gaze toward him, her expression initially cautious and unreadable. He recognized the guardedness in her eyes, a protective instinct that came naturally in her line of work. Yet, as her features softened and a genuine smile began to form, the tension that had lingered between them seemed to dissipate, at least momentarily. "Judge Castellanos," she replied, her tone measured but devoid of hostility, revealing a flicker of mutual respect beneath the surface. In the ensuing moments, they exchanged polite pleasantries, their words tinged with an underlying current of cautious hope. However, the shadow of their last encounter, a difficult conversation laced with misunderstandings and hurt feelings, loomed overhead like an unspoken specter. It weighed on both of them, a reminder of the complexities that lay not only in their professional roles, but also in the very human emotions that complicated their interactions. Gathering his courage, Judge Castellanos took a deep breath, closing his eyes for just a brief moment to center himself. This was a pivotal moment for him, one that required honesty and vulnerability. Looking directly into her eyes, he began to speak, his voice steadying with each word. "I wanted to tell you in person, Chief," he started, ensuring his sincerity shone through every syllable. "I've been working hard to educate myself and to truly understand the biases that led me to that mistake, the one that brought us here, standing in this awkward moment together." He paused, feeling the gravity of his confession settle between them. "I've realized that the change has to start with me," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "I am committed to introspection and growth, to becoming a better judge and a better person, not only for my sake, but for the community that looks to us for guidance and fairness." In that moment, he hoped that she could see the earnestness in his eyes, the deep desire to rectify his past shortcomings and to mend the fragile bond that had been strained by circumstance. As the evening continued, the gentle laughter of her son blended with the fading light, offering a bittersweet reminder of the innocence and hope that existed even in the midst of their complex adult realities. They stood on that precipice of change, both aware that the work ahead would take time and effort, but hopeful that, together, they could begin to bridge the gap between their roles and the shared humanity that bound them. Her gaze searched his face intently, a silent plea for authenticity woven into the fabric of her expression as she dissected each of his words with care. "It's not about pity or special treatment," she replied, her voice steady yet laced with conviction. "It's about understanding that we all bring our experiences to the table, and sometimes those experiences can blind us to the truth." As she spoke, the weight of her message hung in the air, drawing out the deeper implications of her words. It was a reminder that the world is often viewed through the lens of personal experience, which can distort one's perception and lead to misjudgment if not examined closely. Her son, impatiently tugging at her hand, was eager to continue their stroll, the innocent urgency of a child seeking adventure momentarily contrasting with the heavy dialogue taking place. However, she held her ground, her eyes fixed firmly on the judge, unwilling to let this critical moment pass without due consideration. "But I appreciate your efforts. It's a good start," she concluded, her tone softening slightly, recognizing the importance of the judge's willingness to engage in this challenging conversation. Their dialogue, however, was abruptly interrupted by the insistent chime of her phone, the sound cutting through the air like a signal of impending urgency. The chief of police glanced at her screen, her expression flickering as concern etched itself across her features. Quickly, she excused herself, but not before casting a lingering look at the judge that spoke volumes, one laden with complexity and unspoken understanding. "Duty calls," she said with a resigned sigh, her smile evaporating like morning mist in the sunlight. "But let's talk more, Judge. There's a lot we both could learn from each other." With those parting words, she turned and walked away, leaving the judge standing amidst a swirl of thoughts and emotions, his mind busily unraveling the threads of their exchange. The weight of the conversation lingered, allowing him to contemplate the profound truths they had touched upon, encouraging the kind of introspection that could lead to real change. As she disappeared from view, he felt the echo of her presence, a blend of challenge and inspiration, prompting him to reflect deeper on the roles they both played within the broader spectrum of their communities. The encounter had been brief, a fleeting moment in the grand tapestry of his life, yet it stirred something profound and deeply buried within him. It wasn't merely a passing thought or a momentary inspiration. It was as if a dormant seed had finally found the appropriate conditions to sprout and grow. He recognized, with clarity, that true transformation, real and lasting change, would not arise from a few self-help books or weekend workshops that promised quick fixes. Instead, it demanded a deeper, more authentic connection with the very community he was privileged to serve. Determined to set this vision into motion, he decided to launch a public outreach program aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding around the complex issue of implicit bias within the judicial system. He envisioned holding town hall meetings, organizing speaking engagements, and creating platforms for open discussions where community members could voice their concerns and share their experiences. The goal was not just to educate, but to create a safe space for healing and transparency where people could come together, learn from one another, and contribute to a more just system. As he shared his plans with his family and friends, their responses reflected a spectrum of emotions. Some beamed with pride, their eyes sparkling with admiration for his courage to take on such an intricate challenge. Others, however, remained skeptical. They questioned his commitment and worried about the potential backlash he could face from peers and the wider community. Yet, for him, the path was clear. He felt a sense of purpose that urged him forward, despite the mixed reactions. In the courtroom, the impact of his journey began to manifest in tangible ways. The judge's rulings, once perhaps dictated solely by the rigidity of the law, gradually started to mirror his evolving perspective. He became an active listener, one who sought not only to hear the words of the individuals standing before him, but to understand the larger context of their circumstances. He asked deeper questions, striving to uncover the nuances behind their actions, aware that each case entailed a story that deserved to be fully told and understood. The shift was not without its challenges. There were moments when the echoes of his former beliefs crept back into his mind, whispering insidiously, attempting to sway his judgment and cloud his understanding. Old habits, once forged by years of practice, reared their heads and made him second-guess himself. However, with each case he heard, he felt a fortifying strength growing within him, a resilience that was bolstered by his unwavering commitment to fairness and justice. He realized that while doubt may linger on the edges of his consciousness, it would not dictate his actions or conclusions. Each decision he made reaffirmed his dedication to creating a more equitable judicial process, and with every case, he reaffirmed his resolve to confront bias head-on. What began as a brief encounter had evolved into a vital journey, one that not only changed him, but also rippled through the lives of others as he inspired them to consider the impact of their own biases and become advocates for change within their communities. As the months passed, the town of Elmwood saw a shift. The judge's public apology had sparked a conversation that rippled through the community, reaching into schools, businesses, and local government. People began to recognize their own biases, and slowly, the town started to change. It was a gradual shift, but it was a shift nonetheless. One by one, Judge Castellanos's colleagues began to take notice of his transformation. Some were inspired to follow in his footsteps, while others remained entrenched in their views. Yet, even in the face of resistance, he pushed for new training programs and policies that promoted diversity and inclusivity within the courts. The journey was long and arduous, but with each step, the judge felt the weight of his past mistakes lighten. He had become not just an enforcer of the law, but a champion of justice, working tirelessly to ensure that every person who entered his courtroom was treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. The epilogue of this story remained unwritten, the pages of the judge's life still waiting to be filled with tales of growth and change. Yet, as he looked out over the town he had sworn to serve, he knew that this was not a tale of redemption, but a testament to the power of awareness and the courage to confront one's own prejudices. In the end, it was not about his legacy, but about the legacy of a town striving to live up to the ideals of equality and justice for all.